Hello, everybody, and welcome to Answer the Call. I think this is episode 10, so we've actually hit double digits. When we first started this, I had no idea if we would ever get here, to be honest. And it's changed so much and become a pretty cool thing. So, I just want to tell you that I appreciate like all the support that you guys have given the show over the last 10 weeks, and I hope you guys continue, and I hope you guys keep enjoying the show. One of the biggest challenges every week is coming up with a solid topic. As you can see below, this week's topic is Star Citizen too realistic? Now, that is very broad, so I'm going to simplify it more for the proper discussion. Is Star Citizen too realistic in terms of, are they trying to do too much in terms of their realism? So I'm going to give it some examples of where I think they may be trying to do too much, at least in comparison to other games, right? The female model. We talked about this yesterday on my Twitch stream. The female model was something that a lot of games just change the model and give they have unified animations between the male and the female. They move exactly the same. The model's just a little bit different. For the female model, I think one of the major challenges were with it the fact that they want to redo animations completely for the female. The flight model being fully simulated and all this physics and all this stuff, instead of just going, well, that's fun. Let's do it this way. Just art in general. It's very, very detailed, right? Little nuts and bolts and all these polygons on the screen that make a lot of things challenging, make it challenging for our computers to play it, and make it challenging for their servers to run it in specifically. Procedural planets was some realism that wasn't in the original scope of the game, and we have now. I think one of the major feature creeps that have come into Star Citizen. For a time, elevators were something that were massively realistic, and they broke all the time. Travel times is probably going to be a pretty popular topic this week. They're sort of realistic and sort of a hot topic right now because some people feel they're a little bit too long, some people feel they're not long enough, some people feel they're too short, some people feel they're just right. They're kind of all over the place. The economy sim and just the solar system simulation in general, very, very detailed, maybe overdone. In general, specifically for me, the solar system with the rotating and the orbiting, and to have the Lagrange points, and we can only have things here, and you can't have like a station just randomly over here and a station randomly over there because it wouldn't make sense. It's a lot. Okay, examples of no, I don't have too many, but the current elevators where we teleport, that's fine. The way it works, it is weird when you see somebody's little icon pop and move randomly to somewhere else, but while you're in the elevator, you don't really notice that. For me, ship spawning and despawning is something that is not realistic at all right now, and that's okay. It's not great. I think they're going to have to do some changes to it. They definitely don't like it, but the fact that ships pop in and out is not realistic, and I don't think people really want that. Now, for me, what's wrong with realism? Not a lot, but there are some things, right? It creates too much downtime in the game. You have to balance between realism and fun, and I think Star Citizen is leaning more towards the realism in some cases than the fun. It slows down the game's development massively. Remember, procedural planets, female models, all these things. So now I'm just going to pose the question to you. What is too much? What's not enough? What do you have to have in this game in terms of realism? And yeah, what's something you can't do without, I guess? And then I guess we can let the topic kind of grow from there. But, the question of, is Star Citizen too realistic? I think people want it to be as realistic as possible. I think we all do in some cases. But you have to balance realism with fun. And where is the line on some of these things? Where's the line on travel times? Where's the line on the solar system size and where things are located. Where's the line with the flight model? Stuff like that. It's okay to fake some things. Like I'll give one more example before we move on. Hover bikes. They were a mess for so long, and because most games that do hover bikes have wheels that are invisible, they don't actually hover, And Star Citizen refused to do that. So now they have to do all these physics calculations that could be bogging down the server or something like that, just because they wanted it to be more realistic. So for me, sometimes they just don't make it easy enough on themselves when they could, right? So, all right, we have some people in line. Cayman's has next week's topic. He suggested it, which is I'll have to look back at it. I can't remember what it was, but it's Cayman's. I'll just bring Cayman in, who is definitely a VIP caller. All right. So Cayman, you're on welcome to the call. You're on welcome to the call. You're on answer the call. Welcome to answer the call. So what do you got, man?
Good morning, Torp. Thank you so much for taking my call again.
Of course.
I feel very passionately about this topic, and there's so much that we could talk about. I could talk about this all day, but time is limited, so I'm gonna just touch on a few points, hopefully, and get. So in my recollection of the various videos and interviews, it appears to me that Chris Roberts and other designers tend to avoid using the term realistic unless it's accompanied with some sort of acknowledgement that gameplay and fun is more important. So for example, we've now seen early examples of them creating space dust and cloud volumes with exaggerated visual elements that aren't strictly realistic. But, despite it not being strictly, because they'd be imperceptible, those clouds would be imperceptible when traveling through them in real life.
Yeah.
But they give players this exciting sort of whimsical navigation path that can have knock-on gameplay effects on their flight or their ship, like electromagnetic interference, for example. So I imagine that an upgraded Carrack, for instance, with EM-resistant shielding, could navigate unstable cloud fields or jump points quite effectively where other craft could not. This provides branching paths of gameplay opportunities based on your component selection and your ship type. It also intelligently makes use of the huge universe that they're building. It really plays to their unique strengths, to the unique strengths of the game, because the game was pitched as this very detailed universe.
Of course.
Even the original Kickstarter, I recall Chris Roberts staying up all night. He was the one programming the physicalized engines and how they moved and how they responded when you're moving your ship around. This is back in 2012 when he programmed the tech to that backstarting demo himself.
Yeah.
So this was part of the original soul, the bones, the guts of the game. So in fact, the future setting of the game itself poses a fundamental obstacle to literal realism because there's no real-world reference of a civilization capable of interstellar travel.
Of course.
So if anything, designing a future universe like Star Citizen would actually go somewhat in the reverse and instead involve some degree of actually fictionalizing real-world elements and drawing inspiration from other works of sci-fi. So I don't see realism as this single-issue silo that needs to be carefully portioned out one way or the other, one direction or the other. Instead, I see CIG's challenge, like with any AAA semi-realistic game, GTA, all these other games, as effectively nailing the experience they're going for. And that experience happens to include an unprecedented level of fidelity, but that's just a part of their overall challenge. So Chris Roberts has repeatedly emphasized wanting player experiences to be tactile, and he seems to prefer this term, tactile, over realistic. So for example, he wants that high-level interaction with objects and interfaces at the ship level, like in your cockpit, the MFDs and all that, all the way down to the coffee cup in your HAB while planetside. So he wants the pilot and the crew to have this sense of urgency from dynamic visual and audio feedback as their ships take on catastrophic damage. This would also give engineers their cues for where to effect repairs. He wants physical inventories on your person to emphasize reasonable carrying limits while rewarding good decision making. These things add to the game, in my opinion.
I agree, but at what point? Okay, I'll give a perfect example here. I think is, and I think we'll go into this a little bit, is the travel times. They want it to feel long distance, and I think it was more of a hotter topic earlier on, but 12 minutes between, one planet and another, while that feels real, how much tactile gameplay can I do on my ship to keep myself occupied and gamified during that time? Not always am I going to be flying an Aurora or a combat ship between those two things. And I think they're trying to incentivize, group play, taking larger ships, like put your ship in another ship and travel it somewhere else. I think they're trying to incentivize that. And I get it, but they're in a good place now where they can say, okay, this is too much or this is not enough. And, with all that stuff, when do you say, okay, this is too much? And when do you say, it's not enough? In that specific case, like a lot of the points you make are totally fine, but they're not really hitting on the major points for me that are issues, which were, animations having to be super realistic right now, which are things that you can update over time, for the release of the game. The flight model being all over the place all the time because it has to be, simulated perfectly with physics and this and that, when other games are just like up, down, left, right, strafeful, and they seem to work fine and people enjoy them. And then the travel times. So what do you think about that stuff?
I think that the travel time is a big concern, but I think that there's going to be a certain degree of that being a penalty based on starter ships. I think that the lower tier ships you may have to accept a certain level of inconvenience, or you may be gated from having to access or being able to even travel a certain level of distance before it becomes too tedious. So if you have a starting ship, I can envision you being gated simply because of the size of the quantum drive. And because we know that the quantum speeds, at least right now, are going to be slower than a larger ship with a larger quantum drive,
Yep.
that could just come as a cost of, that could just come with the territory. It could just be a penalty for having a smaller ship. Being able to travel longer distances, it will just take longer.
And when you have a smaller ship, you should just stay where you are.
I'm not saying you should stay where you are. I'm saying it could just be a built-in time penalty for trying to have an expedition that's a very, very long distance with a small quantum drive. I think that's kind of built into what they seem to want to do. It seems to be built into their vision, because from what I'm hearing from you is you want fun and simplicity. I think that's a bit reductive. Maybe that's not what you're saying exactly, but
a bit more simplicity,
some more uniformity in those experiences based on regardless of the type of ship that you're flying. But I think that they're looking specifically to design a system where certain types of ships will benefit more, like a Carrack that is designed for exploration with EM-resistant shielding can go into risky jump paths and deal with the challenge of that. But if you try to take a nice luxury 315p, even after its rework, to do the same, you're going to be hit with some penalties, whether it be increased time, whether it be your ship is damaged because you go into an electromagnetically active field or something. I think that those are very real possibilities, but that is by design. And it's not, and maybe we kind of fundamentally disagree with whether or not that should exist as a designed or intentional penalty, but that's my understanding of it.
No, I don't think we're disagreeing at all. It's just there's some outliers too that are issues, like, for example, the Herald, the smaller ship. It has a smaller quantum travel drive, but it's supposed to be the fastest ship in the game and move information quickly between one place and another, but it can't because it can't quantum travel fast enough.
Yeah. My understanding of that was it was the fastest ship in a straight line outside of quantum.
But then what's the point of it then?
I don't know.
When quantum travel actually is the travel, you almost never travel like any sort of significant distance outside of quantum travel. No one's really going over 100 kilometers, maybe 200 kilometers outside of quantum travel.
That's an excellent point. And when you all brought this up in a previous stream, when you all were talking about, you actually brought this up, I feel like that poses an interesting contradiction with the way that we well, the way that I at least currently envision how it's supposed to work.
Yeah.
Because if you're data running, you would expect to be data running through systems or at least enough of a significant distance to be quantuming. But at the same time, if they're developing it so that it's also very, very fast out of quantum, maybe they will create gameplay where that is a necessity and where that kind of advantage can be leveraged. I don't know yet, and I can't really comment on that, but your concern is well noted. But I do think that CIG should absolutely lean into this approach of adapting certain elements of realism into their game world in a way that enhances the immersion and the level of depth in gameplay. You mentioned the female models and animations. I didn't expect you to mention that in the intro. I did kind of expect travel times, but I didn't expect us to really talk about animations or the technical challenges as much.
Well, think about how long, like, this was a topic, and honestly, this is a topic I want to bring on to answer the call, but I want to bring it on with a female guest, because I don't think it's appropriate for a male that doesn't understand what it's like to be a female to just sit here and say, yeah, it's fine to have males in game only for right now. Females can come in at the very end. We don't need them. I don't think that's appropriate. Now, that is my opinion on the matter, but that's for another answer the call. Is, develop the game first, bring in the other stuff later. The game can function, and then you can spend time on bringing the female model into the game. That's always been my opinion. So it's not like as urgent as it is for other people. But again, I'm a male. It's hard to have that perspective. But for me, a lot of people are like, where's the female model? Why don't we have it? Blah, 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 blah. And the answer always has been is the animations, doing all these animations, blah, 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 blah. And that is something that has upset a certain sector of this community because it's taken too long, and they want to be, in my opinion, with that, too realistic. Is a lot of games just a female actual player model with we share animations.
Yeah.
And
I really
and again, I think when the listen, all of these things that I disagree with, they will obviously make the game better. Right? But they won't make the game come in faster. And so, I mean, for one thing, travel times, economy sim, solar system simulation may not make the game better. They may make the game more complicated than it should be, in my opinion, and maybe not as fun. I don't want to play Kerbal Space Program. And I don't think we will, but I don't want to play Kerbal Space Program.
Yeah. I understand. I actually agree about the female models, and I do think that that's a worthy discussion or worthwhile discussion, maybe in a very minor sense, even now, because it is sort of a knock-on effect. It plugs into sort of the community. It plugs into the social ideas that revolve around how we envision what their priorities should be. So I do think it's important because it does touch on those things. This idea of them. It's kind of like one of your previous questions of, is Star Citizen doing too much? And you and I also talked about that a bit. But I think that the animation challenge and kind of where they are, just from a technical point of view, is at a point where, regardless, it cannot be minimized. I think that they are plugged into their current animation techniques. And I think that it would be very unwise of them, after all of the conflagration that the community has experienced in the certain segment of the community that really, really wants and are looking forward to female models, as am I think after putting them up through all that, even now, at this point forward, even still, it would be the most logical thing to continue on and to ensure that those models and that the animations for the female models are in parity with all the stuff they are doing, have done, and plan to do with their male counterparts. So I don't think it's logical or reasonable for them to backpedal and say, let's start simplifying things out of nowhere or simplifying entire systems after we've already given these lengthy explanations as to why you can't have things, and after we've already established that we're doing things at a certain level of fidelity. Yeah, I don't think that's wise. So,
and again, that's not what I'm claiming either. They can't go back. They're where they are now. You can't go back. But if they do hit challenges where they can't do things. For example, maybe the flight model. Elevators have been an example of that, where we now teleport. They've gone back. Elevators aren't realistic anymore. I think we have some in Levski and in Grimhex, but overall, we're not getting those realistic elevators like we used to in Levski, Lorville. We teleport in those. So, when things are too complicated, they do the right thing and simplify stuff for themselves. It may not be simplified gameplay for the player, but it's simplified to actually make the game work. Right?
Yeah, I think that we agree in that regard because, as I said previously, it's not really a challenge to them to approach realism like a tube filled with a liquid and they just sort of gauge it up and down. I don't really see it that way. I see it as them aiming for an experience and taking certain cues from, yes, certain aspects in real life or certain real life elements, physicalized elements and things of that nature, but designing and tailoring that experience that they're going for. And if that requires that they technically do something that is not realistic or create a tech solution that's not necessarily realistic, then so be it. So for certain design approaches they've made to this end, they've been very successful in my opinion, but others are still clear works in progress. So for instance, take head stabilization tech developed by Eva Herzog, who's their lead animation engineer in Frankfurt, I believe. That tech basically adapts the head stabilization found in real life birds as a solver into the human game rig. This was a very clever solution to their first-person perspective animation problems, and now it serves as an excellent foundation to the first-person experience. But we don't have bird heads in real life. And people complained about the audio issues where they would create an audio system, or it looks like they're creating this audio system where they're adjusting the volume based on what happens in the background so that you could hear what the primary actors are saying. And people say, well, my ears don't do that in real life, so this isn't realism. Again, it's
gamified.
It's a foolish argument though, because it's not attempting to simulate what the human ear is doing. It's attempting to nail an experience.
Exactly.
So again, like we absolutely do agree on that, I think. And on the flip side, you have this current turret design, which still isn't one-to-one, as I understand, presumably as they want to convey moving turret machinery and probably for other perceived balance reasons that they think are necessary. But some people have noted that World War II military tech, for instance, effectively allowed one-to-one turret tracking. And there are certainly divided opinions on design choices with regard to ships, like the cargo decision in the Valkyrie compared to similarly purposed craft in real life. So they do have their work cut out for them in achieving the right balance. But again, the bottom line is using real world solutions for in-game design problems can be very useful if done selectively and logically.
Yes.
And this is the development path that they appear to be taking, at least in my mind. And I think they should continue on that path.
All right, I'll make one more. We only have one other caller, so if you guys do want to join in and take part in the conversation, feel free to just !Discord and pop in and join. And if anyone's on YouTube, 9 a.m. Eastern time every Sunday, you guys can come to twitch.tv/Church17 and take part in the show yourself as well. But somebody in chat said your brain actually does do that with the ear thing. It's called selective auditory attention, but your brain doesn't do what they showed us on that video where you're now focus mode and you can hear them perfectly and everything's drowned out. It's not really like that. So that's what he means, and that's what I'm agreeing with him about. That is not realism. That is their take on selective auditory attention.
And it's them referencing that aspect of human audio experience into a technical solution that works best for the game that they are building. It's not them saying, here's our version of real life, here's a real life simulation, here's us trying to do real life or nail real life for the sake of doing it. This is them trying to nail an experience and go and to knock on Chris Roberts' intention to make the game experience tactile. He wants a tactile experience, and he uses that more than realistic, because if you have a tactile experience, there's always a sense of tension. There's always a sense of gratification with where you do minor things, the mundane tasks that we talked about last week. There's always this sense of this payoff, this reward, this level of fidelity that can be fun to play with. And you made excellent point last week, and I didn't get to expand upon it, but I still remember it when you were talking about inventory management. We were talking about day-to-day mundane activities, and you were saying the very basics of the game, like inventory management, and how you just deal with the mundane actions day to day, need to be nailed down, and that needs to be good. So if anything, that should be something that they pay a tremendous amount of attention to, not necessarily making it quote unquote realistic.
No,
but
because it
certainly
can't be.
adding-
It's a video game.
Exactly. But certainly adding a degree of fidelity that makes it fun to play and tinker with. Like having good inventory systems makes a game enjoyable. It makes, interacting with all the components enjoyable. It makes just doing the day-to-day UI interaction stuff fun to do. And I felt like that was an excellent point. So again, I think that when some people think of realism, they think of, developers trying to push their version of real life reality or a simulation. And I really don't think games do that. I think that behind the scenes, from a design perspective, it's always about using aspects of reality or using aspects of the real world as points of inspiration, and then building tech solutions to create very specific experiences that, if you actually saw how they worked under the hood, they're very gamified, they're very hand waved, they're very contrived, but they have to be. Even this game, I think, we underestimate how,
ships floating in
clever-
atmosphere.
Yes, I think we yes
Because they
exactly.
can. Is
Yes.
basically their answer.
And
lot
they
of
kind of
time.
have to.
But
Yeah,
now
yeah,
they're
yeah.
going with the opposite, right? So that's my point with the flight model. And I don't know, maybe I'll make this last point and let you say something, because again, we still only have that one other caller. The flight model is going to change things a lot. If a ship looks like it should fly in atmosphere, it will. If it can't, it won't. And we're starting to see some things like with Lorville, how difficult it is to get out of atmosphere in a ship like a Starfarer.
Yeah.
10 minutes, but it also feels like it might be a little bit broken because you can only strafe up, you can't fly forward, all sorts of weird things. So we have to see what happens with the new flight model, but I hope they don't go too realistic simulation and make it enjoyable, because for me personally, I like to fly a lot of the bigger ships and the cargo ships and things like that. And I really want it to be a challenge. I really want to feel the weight, especially when you have cargo in it. But
Yeah.
I still want it to be doable. And I don't want to spend 20 minutes trying to leave an atmosphere. But at the same time, we also had this discussion about the travel times, where 10 minutes to leave the atmosphere, but when you go into quantum travel, that ship has a bigger quantum travel drive. So you still might beat somebody in a smaller ship from Hurston
Yes.
to Port Olisar. So
Yes.
it's give and take, but
Yes.
how much give and take? And that's really what I'm trying to get out of this episode here, is how much is too much? How much is too little? What's the give and take here? And I don't know. I don't think we have an answer necessarily, but I think it's something that we can, make a few little opinions here and try and come up with some ideas. I think you made a fantastic point for me that, I always felt that Star Citizen was trying to be too realistic, and I never looked at it with the way you said about it being tactile. And it kind of changes my opinion on it, where I was always like, come on, guys, why don't you just do it the easy way, make the game fun, get people in the game and playing it, and then you can go as real as possible after. But, them having the groundwork and everything should make things easier in the long run, but it's really hard now. It's really hard to be a Star Citizen backer now. And it's always difficult to not be selfish and just
Yeah.
let them do their thing, right? Because it's hard to be a backer now. It's hard to have fun now because it's not what they want it to be. It's not what we want it to be yet,
And I think that the alpha undersells what they're trying to do. Obviously,
definitely.
because it's still a work in progress. And to be honest with you, when you were talking about the big ships having a very difficult time leaving atmosphere, I actually find that really exciting.
Me
And
too,
it's not-
but
not-
only
not as a
to only to a point.
Yes, not only to a point, but not as a consistently difficult experience. But I think that the extremes, the margins of what is possible under a quasi, game realistic sense of what can be expected in these ships is exciting.
Like, can I
So
give an
imagine,
example of what I would think? I'm sorry for interrupting, but for me, it's like, all right, I have a Caterpillar, or I have a Starfarer, or I have a Reclaimer. Those are the three biggest ones that we have, right? Filled with cargo, whatever. The initial takeoff should be extremely challenging. But once I'm getting up in the air, now we're talking about holding a button and pointing in one direction and doing nothing else for 5 or 10 minutes at a time.
not necessarily. You're not thinking big enough to work. I'm going to disagree with you here
Okay,
because
go for
planets change. Planets will change. Atmospheric conditions will change. The locale you're in will change. It can be a quest in and of itself, getting that ship's big, thick behind out of that planet. If it's high gravity, if it's a moon that's particularly high gravity because it has a it kind of similar to neutron stars, what it's made up of is really extremely dense. So it's very, very difficult to get out of that particular locale. They're going to have different environmental challenges in the future because there'll be different, planets, different landing locations. And so I'm envisioning that in some scenarios, it's going to be exceedingly difficult to get a cargo laden large craft out of atmosphere. Even that's going to be risky to you and possibly damaging to your ship. And this is something you talked about before when you said how risk doesn't need to constitute combat. It can also constitute damage to your ship.
Yes.
So even the takeoff process can be exciting, heart thumping. It depends on the environment. It's not all the time, but again, it's about the margins.
But that's what the point I'm trying to make is that once you reach a certain altitude, it is literally hold space or hold whatever your button is, to your boost button. It's not a challenge. It's not it's not as fairy tale as you're making it sound, because let's say that you're involved in a system and it's you're in a star system. Now the example that I'm trying to give is, and I was going to say this earlier, but again, people comment all the time. I'm trying not to interrupt. And a lot of the planets that we're going to be on have been terraformed by humans. Therefore, most likely the gravity is somewhere near Earth's gravity, right? Hurston, Earth's gravity, and So and somewhat the similar atmosphere, right? Atmospheric density, all that stuff. So I feel like a lot of the places that we're going to travel to and from are not going to have those unique experiences that you're saying. Those experiences should be that challenge, should be that amazing thing. I know terraforming a planet will not make the planet have the same gravity, but then why does Hurston have Earth's gravity? Why, So this is that realism versus gameplay thing. I think a lot of the places are going to have somewhat similar gravities to Earth. And maybe that's why they were chosen. How about that, guys? Mm-hmm. Maybe that's why they were chosen. And we're good candidates for terraforming. Maybe we can go with that, okay? But the fact that I may be doing that for multiple hours a day when playing the game, that's where I'm not okay with it. Like if I'm doing now this is what we have right now in Star Citizen, and there isn't too much as far as trade runs go. But if I'm starting to do trade runs from Port Olisar to Hurston because that's the most profitable thing, do you know how boring that's going to get? Like, do you know how quickly that's going to get boring? But do you know how exciting it is leaving right away and coming in to the port? Because it is a bit of a challenge. You're holding this heavy ship. Oh my God, I have to go into this tiny little window and try and land my ship. That's so exciting. That's so exhilarating every single time. But the 10 minutes after that is what's going to kill the experience, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
So we're agreeing, but we're like not like at the same time.
I think that we agree.
Yeah.
And it could be because of how I'm aggressively stating my positions, probably because this is a great topic to me, and I love the points that you're making. But I agree with you absolutely, and I think that we absolutely agree. I'm just saying
because like player skill has to be a thing with that, right?
Yes, Yes, I'm saying that I'm very excited at the prospect of there being extremes on the outlier of the consistent experience. I'm
Hell
not
yeah.
saying that the consistent experience
Yeah.
is going to be, nor should be, nor can realistically be the kind of variables that I'm throwing out. I'm throwing out the extremes just to throw them out there because I find those exciting as well.
Of
But I
course.
agree
But do
with
you
you
think the
absolutely.
consistent experience is what we have now?
I don't know what you mean by that question.
Do you think the consistent experience of leaving a planet from the surface be what we have now, where you, I mean, this is where some things can change a bit, and maybe, like you said, I'm not looking at it big enough, and we now have an extra caller, so we'll probably try and end this as quickly as possible. Is maybe this is what they're going for? Okay. Do you guys remember CitizenCon 2017 demo where we were looking down at ArcCorp from a rest stop? It was right in orbit, like seemingly at the very entrance to atmosphere, or at least ArcCorp's gravity, right? And you looked right down on it. It was so close. It took up almost the entire screen. Maybe that's the plan for the future, is fly your big cargo hauler to this rest stop, transfer cargo to the smaller ships, and bring them down to the surface.
Yeah,
And then you're not dealing with these atmospheric effects.
Yeah,
right.
Because we know that the larger ships, most of them at least, well, the larger cargo ships in particular, and I'm thinking about the whole E series, the larger of the whole series, starting from the Hull C, I believe, up to the Hull E, as well as ships like the Orion, which it's not a cargo ship specifically, but it does have some similarities structurally in terms of the hull because of it carrying its own sort of refined materials and stuff like that. But we do know that some of them won't even be able to land. These large, huge ships won't even be able to have that atmospheric experience in the first place because they won't be able to land properly, and you probably won't be able to get them out in the first place. So this is again an excellent point you're making with regard to how, again, the ship diversity is going to create these specializations where you create this chain of how that type of cargo transit system works. The small ships, even though they're going to have, I think, and this is just my speculation, my prediction, they're going to have a difficult time. You're going to have a hard time, kind of how the meme says, if you try to do an expedition of a very, very long distance, even if it's an exploration-based craft with a very small quantum drive. Just good luck with that. That's going to be a very time-consuming experience. But you are going to have an easy time in local space and dealing with atmosphere, relatively speaking, to very large ships. So that could be, that could give those types of smaller ships value, and it's going to give larger ships their place too. So you do have those gameplay and those knock-on effects. But I do think that the consistent experience, they should very much focus on making that arc like you're talking about. They should envision
very exciting at the beginning.
Yes, yes. Making that arc, work well for them. But I love this conversation, and I just want to thank you again for creating this fantastic podcast. I always really enjoy our conversation. So
I do too. I appreciate you being on every week, man. Thank you so much.
All right, take care.
Bye now. All right, we're going to bring in Bellatar. I know that was a long call, guys, but we did it because there weren't as many callers today, okay? And Cayman's always a great call, so. Bellatar, welcome to answer the call. How are you?
Network, I'm good. How are you?
Good. Is this your first time on, or were you on at the very beginning, right?
I was on the last show as well.
Were you? Okay, so we had a lot of people on the last show.
Yeah, there were quite a lot of people.
All right, so what's up? What are your thoughts? We did talk about a lot.
Yeah, that's true, and I think I can just connect to that a last point that you were discussing. That was a very good example because to me it felt a bit like the discussion was too much fixed on what is in the game
right now, right?
Possible currently.
Yeah.
And in chat, some very good points were made, which I very much agree with, because that example with some big cargo ship taking ages to go out of atmosphere. I think that is just one of the purposes of adding some kind of realism to the game, which is creating something like a risk reward or cost reward. so that you say, okay, this would take me ages to do, so I won't do it. But instead, these are those smaller cargo haulers are for. And either I have a crew or an org with some of those ships, so they will help me out for free.
Like multiple, right?
Yeah,
like
exactly that. So,
yeah. Go ahead.
Or you might, you might even add in for people who might have that huge cargo ship, but don't have an org to help them out.
Mm-hmm.
You might even establish this station in orbit where you can hire NPC cargo haulers for a fee. Which is all, again, you have some kind of cost. You pay those NPC cargo haulers a small fee, and they will ferry it down to the planet for you. It is all, again, incentivizing and creating cooperative gameplay options.
Yeah, I mean, so what you make me think about is, and this is a game I've been so excited about over the last few days, is Farm Simulator 19. Like you could play with your friends. And you have one guy that's like gathering whatever, and then another person in a truck that you drop all the seeds into or the finished product into, right? It's sort of similar to that. I don't know why I'm so friggin' excited about that game. I don't know why, but yeah.
Well, I thought you were memeing, but okay.
No, I'm not. That game looks so fun, man. It looks so fun. But it's like those elements. It's really like a lot of that. Like I imagine a Hull E and then 10 Hull A's. That are all just taking the stacks off of that ship and bringing them down to the surface and selling them for a larger organization, right?
Yep. And I think it's just what you're advertising, of course. Sometimes I want to play the game alone. I don't want to have to deal with anyone. But I think there's a big danger lurking because in a very basic sense for a game, in that you make the game too comfortable and too easy and too little complex at the beginning, it is very hard to add complexity and chores later on.
Very good point.
Than to take them away. So I would prefer to actually start a little bit overshooting on complexity. And maybe it will cost you a few casual gamers, but you would lose them anyway after 50 to 60 hours. But there will be people who will like the challenge, who will lean into it and try to solve it. Mm-hmm. And this is, I think, creating really fun gameplay. One example for that was the first iteration of Lorville that got into the game, where the ATC was not working. It's actually not even a realism or gameplay decision. It's just a flat-out bug. You couldn't land at the town. And what happened was that very quickly a taxi service from Gate 4 emerged, which was actually a lot of fun to play. So that's something.
Levski 2 when it was broken, right?
Yeah. Those kinds of things always have some trust, especially in a fan base like Star Citizen, which are not your 10-year-old console gamers who rage quit.
Fortnite players, if you would.
I didn't want to say it, but okay.
It's relevant to today. Yes, for those of you guys that spend time on Reddit, you might see this at some point. But I kept crashing in Star Citizen, and I said if I crash one more time, I'm playing one game of Fortnite. And before I can even finish the sentence, I crashed. So, yeah.
And you're still owing us 4 dabs.
No, I gave I dabbed.
4 kills, 4 dabs.
I got 4 kills and I dabbed 4 times. I did it. It was awful, but I did it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I think to diverge from this specific example a little bit to the basics of that, what I think is important in regards to realism is that it must not be it may even be self-serving. I think the first thing you have to do as a game developer is to define your target audience, the ones you will be designing this game for. And then the level of realism desired or wanted kind of emerges from that. And what you have to do is to stay true to that, and then to to not do self-serving realism. I think that female model example is a very good one, where I'm not quite convinced yet that this is adding anything to the game.
That's the hardest thing is
gameplay.
you're a male. So it doesn't do it for you.
Totally fair.
You know?
Totally fair. Absolutely.
That's why, like, I want to have this discussion, but I can't do it without a female. I brought my girlfriend on, and we talked about it yesterday a little bit. But I think I want like a Star Citizen diehard female that you know, and get their opinion on it. But yes, I don't disagree with you. It doesn't add any gameplay for me. And is a majority of the Star Citizen community male? Yes. So is it needed right now? I don't know. You know? Do I need it in 3.4? I don't. Do I need it in 5.0? Okay.
So it may be a good example. It may be also a bad example, because this is just another dimension where you're going out of the gameplay and design bubble into a real world issue and ethics, where I'm totally with you. I say this has to be a thing, and it can't be done in a patronizing way. Listen to what the female gamers have to say themselves, and even if it is a non-gameplay serving effort, just put it in to make a statement. I would be totally okay with that.
Yeah, and 1 second, just to interrupt you and get out of this bubble for a second. Aliciana's in chat, and she's the one that I would love to have on this show and have that discussion with her and do this with her. We don't do guests on the show really as much anymore, but I think that would be a perfect situation. So I'm going to put her on the spot a little bit, and just let me know if you would be interested, Aliciana, and maybe we'll do this in the future. So we'll see. All right.
Okay. So I think the core issue is that realism needs to be serving some kind of purpose, whether it is just basically satisfying the expectations of your core audience, or to create a challenge in game that you need to overcome to raise the skill ceiling, where we're talking about flight model, for instance, because if you're just moving in space like you're moving on rails, then it is again maybe exciting for a Fortnite audience, but not for a space flight simulator audience, because it's just not challenging at all, and you cannot add moves, because flight model especially starts to get interesting when you have inertia and you can use decoupled mode in a skillful way. If you can work around G-forces skillfully, so that there's this where realism adds something to strive for and to get better at the game, so that you never fall into feeling like you've finished it or you're perfect now, that you have always something to learn and to strive for. I think that's an important aspect of that.
Even when you're flying in and you're not in a streamlined kind of atmospheric flight type ship, and the ship starts moving all over the place and you start hearing metal rattle, like that stuff's really cool, right? Like that's why I think personally, sometimes I feel like, okay, the flight model, why are they trying to do it so realistically? But then when you're actually in game playing it and you experience it, it's like kind of really fun. And, you know, obviously we run into bugs. My biggest issue is more with like the motorcycle ships and why they just made it so complicated for themselves. But now look at them. But they're a hell of a lot of fun, right?
They are, and I think they're going to be
even
much
better,
more fun in the future. I think they said in Sitcom that they are actually aiming to rework it, that it more operates like a jet ski, like right now, where it is constantly shooting itself into space.
Yeah.
Which is just a very flawed implementation.
Yeah.
So this, if you add those physics, I think it always also pays into simplifying the process of designing surfaces for those vehicles. Because if it's physics-based, you just put your surface there and then let the physics interact with the vehicle, and it works. If you don't have proper physics, you'll have to, just like vaulting, design all the animations to get over or to get around all of those specific objects, because your game is dumb in that way.
Yeah.
So I think that might in the background even have a payback, so that you in the long term will have less effort that has to be put into designing surfaces if you have a proper physics model for hover bike.
Okay. All right, do you have anything else you want to add before I bring on the next caller?
Oh, I have a very long list. Yeah, I have to look.
Shorten it a little bit.
Yeah, of course, I will.
And then we'll bring on the next guy.
Yeah. So I think the core point being realism has to add something to gameplay, and that also shows in inventory manage. It creates incentives for bigger ships, even where you would say, if you do not do any realism, where you have this magic inventory where everything can be conjured out of thin air everywhere, why would you even bother having a Cutlass Black over some kind of small dogfighter? Because you can just stack yourselves up with weapon and ammo to the bone. Then of course you will choose the most nimble ship with the most firepower to go anywhere, go on your mission, because you can even EVA out and then have your full loadout. But you are not limited in any way. So if you then have a Cutlass Black, as opposed to that, you may add the feature that there's something like ammunition boxes, even food or rations that you need to physically store somewhere, which is a kind of realism, just to incentivize having bigger ships for longer missions if you're going on an exploration run, so that you can go back to your ship and replenish and restock.
And that was something that I didn't mention yet, and I'm glad you did, because I forgot to write it down. That was very casually mentioned a couple times, maybe, a year and a half ago, from Dan Truffin and Chris Roberts, about, some survival-ish mechanics in Star Citizen as well. Is that eating and drinking was originally just supposed to add little buffs to you, but not really debuff. And now they were talking about debuffs and some survival mechanics, maybe not DayZ survival mechanics or some like actual survival games, but something like that. And then I haven't talked much about it recently at all, so I don't know what the plan is for it, but it has been mentioned. And I think that is something to kind of bring into the fold here. Is that something... Star Citizen backers or anyone out there listening is interested in,
Well, I think it helps actually, not in the sense of turning it into a survival game, because I'm pretty much, I like FPS games, but I'm a little bit put aback by Escape from Tarkov, for example, which takes the detail a little bit too far for my liking, and that's personal taste, of course. But on the other hand, I think what I just mentioned, to just putting in the need to eat and drink in realistic time frames.
Not like DayZ time frames,
drinking,
right?
But it's not about eating and drinking and making it a mechanic and making it an animation, but it's about requiring you to bring food for long trips, incentivizing having bigger ships, having specific exploration ships, so you cannot just cheese every content with every ship. It creates diversity, and it creates requirements which you need to strive for, again, because then you need that bigger ship. You need to be able to afford it. You need to be able to stock up, and all that. You can create professions for creating those components, for providing food, which opens up another whole universe of gameplay. So it's not for the purpose of being hyper realistic and being survivalist, but for just adding depth to your gameplay.
Yeah.
Even stuff like, I think they recently said about the Arrow that it won't have a weapons compartment to stow away. So it looks like right now, of course, you can in any loadout enter an Arrow, but in the PU, it seems like you won't be able to take any weapons at all because it is supposed to be carrier based.
Well, so maybe like a pistol, right? Like in previous Chris Roberts games, like they had pistols and stuff.
But you won't be able to just hop into it carrying your, I don't know, mass driver gun or whatever. So and I
The
think that
railgun,
makes sense.
yeah. No railgun
Yeah, I
in
think,
those.
yeah. And
Okay.
so that's, I think, something to just keep in mind.
Mm-hmm.
Not realism for realism's sake, but to open up more gameplay opportunities and more gameplay systems that add depth to the game and longevity to the game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Well,
Bellatar, as always. Well, now 2 weeks in a row. For some reason, I thought you were on the first one, but I didn't remember last week. But last week there were so many callers. So, but once you started talking, I was like, oh yeah. So you had a really good call last week as well. So thank you so much, and hopefully we'll see you on a future Answer the Call. Appreciate it.
Oh, most certainly. Thank you for the great show. Bye.
Anytime. All right, Zwajo is next. Zwajo, you're on Answer the Call. Did I say your name right?
Zwajo, yes.
Zwajo, nice. Okay, well, what do you got? We had 2 very long calls, so we discussed a lot of things.
Well, I was gonna point out on the topic with the realism versus kind of the arcade aspect of it. I agree with what you guys had said about the fact that you need to really pin down what are you trying to do. Are
Yeah.
you making another Wing Commander where it's like X-wing and you're going to fly around in a jet in space, or are you doing Microsoft Flight Simulator where it's take off and spend 6 hours staring at nothing while you're waiting to get to the next point?
Yeah. I think most people want something in between, right?
Yeah, I mean,
but where is it? That's like the big problem.
Yeah, you have to be able to identify what are you going to do before you can really begin to lay down those core principles. And I think that's one of the things the Star Citizen hasn't really done yet. They're just so hot and heavy on making the tech that they haven't really nailed down what is the game going to be.
Well, I think I feel like they know what the game is going to be. I feel like Chris and let's say Tony and Aaron and like some of the major designers like Luke and Dan Truffin that we are aware of, I think they know what they want the game to be, but they can't make the game that they want it to be without that tech, right? Like even simple things like some UI tech that Luke was talking about the other day. He's like, I can't wait to make the missions better for you, because he just can't right now, right? So I get what you're saying, but it's hard for them to make the game they want without all that tech. So yes, it's frustrating that they're so hot and heavy on background tech and not working on gameplay, but that background tech helps them work on the gameplay. Unfortunately,
well,
you know.
100% agreement, and I don't mean to sound like they shouldn't be working on the tech. What I mean by that is when you have, like we were already discussing, you've got a 30-45 minute quantum travel, but you've nothing to do in it, and then you still want to have this fighters flying around like X-wings. You know, there's the argument of, okay, well, we want realism here, but we don't want realism there.
Yeah.
And you're not really nailing down like the overarching concept yet. And that to me is just kind of what I mean. They haven't really been able to pin down. It's like they hot swap like the last caller was just talking about, where he went from, we don't want it to be a survival game. Now, well, we've got to kind of maybe add some survival mechanics in. I think they need to find.
You're saying they go shiny too much.
Exactly. There's too much in the industry. There's too much scope creep. There's constantly this feeling of, well, let's just try and get a little bit more in. Well, that's great, but get what you've got done first.
Yeah.
And I think that to me is the big thing with the whole realism thing. We don't know what we're looking at because they keep changing everything up and going, well, but this would be cool too. And so we're left sitting here going, that's great, guys, but right now I can't even get out of Hurston in my Caterpillar. Could we maybe do something about that? Or is that intended? I don't know what's going on.
I don't think it's intended. I think that's like, let's wait for the new flight model and see what happens. None of those ships are set up for the new flight model, but maybe Hurston is. Right? So there's lots of things like that, but trust me, I'm with you. And I think for me, I think the main theme of today's video or today's podcast is that what Cayman said is, I think we're looking we're not looking big enough. We're looking at it too small. We're looking at what we have now and not what we do know they have planned, right? A new flight model, UIs that actually function. Like I can name a million things, right? So we do kind of know where they're going in a lot of cases. But I do also get your point where if you don't put it in the game and see how it functions, you don't know actually what's happening, right? And am I understanding like that's kind of the point that you're trying to make? Like there's so many reworks that happen so often because they put something in and they go, well, that sucks, gotta rework it. Well, that ship doesn't work for what we want to do, gotta rework it. And a lot of the problems is because, like what you said, is they go, ooh, Shiny put this thing in, and well, now that this doesn't work with that thing, so now we have to rework this, and it just keeps this cycle going, and it only hurts us as backers.
And what it leaves the community doing then is having to play guessing games. Are we actually going to be playing Microsoft Flight Simulator? Are we playing X-Wing versus TIE Fighter?
What the hell is insurance?
Are we doing something in between?
Right?
Like, what is insurance? Things. I mean, so now we're guessing what's going on instead of having any clear ideas, and I think that really hurts a lot of the backers because, like a perfect example, over the sale, I really wanted to jump on some of the whole series and stuff, but with the way the new flight models are talking and with everything else that's going on, I like Euro Truck Simulator, I like American Truck Simulator, but I'm not about to sit here and spend 5 hours staring at a blue hyperspace tunnel and nothing else going on in my game. That is not an enjoyable cargo hauling or trading experience. So I'm sitting here guessing what may or may not happen, and I can't really back the game like I might want to because I don't want to spend $400 on something that's going to end up just sitting collecting dust.
And that's fair. And I think you're a really good example of what new players that come into the game and see what it looks like think. And I think you're what a majority of the community thinks. If I've mentioned this so many times on like the Redacted podcast and possibly here, is when we look at like how many people are watching those videos on their YouTube channel, there's like 30,000, right? When people vote on things on the Star Citizen website, there's like 30,000. There's a very small portion of this community that actually cares about what's going on right now and is engaged in Star Citizen right now. And the reason other people aren't engaged and into it right now is for a lot of what you said. I don't know what the hell is happening. I don't know what to expect. So they're not ready to buy in yet. Now, they may buy, like you did, maybe you bought like an Aurora package or a couple small ships, but they're not, I'm not in, and you don't want to go and spend $400, and you shouldn't, right? Again, eventually all these things should be not easily purchasable in game, but earnable in the game through currency. So you don't have to feel that way. But then that's why we're not seeing people buy in as much. Like you see them, they're interested, man. Because when the free flight came around, how many people were playing the game, checking it out, watching streams? They were interested, very interested. But how many of them actually bought in? I don't know, And I think part of it is that reason.
And you hit on a big point right there. There's that aspect of, well, everything should be buyable in game. Well, but again, we're left guessing because right now you're looking at a Hammerhead that's 21 million credits and you're making 500 credits per mission. I'm all about what Chris Roberts said with the whole fact that your ship should be part of your character and that you're not just bouncing from the next best to the next best to the next best.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same token, if I want a specific type of gameplay, I don't want it to be a 6-month grind just to try and get there.
Yeah.
So, but is it going to be? And again, we don't know. And that you're left just kind of sitting there going, well, I don't know what's going on with this.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. Well, all right. Do you have anything else you want to add before we head out?
Well, I was going to say something with the survival mechanics.
Go for it.
I think, I'm a little bit older maybe than some of the Star Citizen community. I remember Oregon Trail and games of that nature.
Me too.
I think having some aspects of that, having to actually plan for your trip, having to, make sure that you've got the supplies, make sure that you've got enough ammo, that you've got enough of all of the different things, so that when you go out, you're covered. I think that's an appealing gameplay. The whole, like, from D&D Bag of Holding, where I just reach into this magic pocket and boom, I can produce whatever, anytime, anywhere. I don't think anybody actually wants that, but at the same time, what I'm scared of is that it's going to become some kind of survival sim where it's like, oh, sorry, because you've got this, you can only do X, Y, or Z for this very small amount of time, because you're going to have to eat and drink, and you've got to make a sandwich, and there's too much of the sim aspect gets turned into a grind instead of fun gameplay.
Yeah, that's what I'm worried about. The travel times, these little things that add up and are taking away from those exciting experiences that we were talking about earlier as well. So, yeah. All right. I'm going to let you go, and we're going to call it a podcast for today. 3 really, really good calls. Zwajo, thank you so much. I think, was this your first time on the show?
It was. Thank you very much.
I appreciate you coming on. It was really good. I hope we have you on again soon.
All right. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you. All right. So, very interesting. And again, if you've made it this far in the video, I appreciate it. And I think that's the kind of takeaway, is maybe we're not thinking big enough, and we're really, at least in my point of view, is that maybe I'm really stuck on what we have now, and what we have now isn't what we're going to have a year from now, isn't what we're going to have 2 years from now, isn't what we're going to have 3 years from now. It's the realism, and Cayman made the best points, is meant to be tactile, to feel, to bring you into the game and make you feel like you're in it. And it's not supposed to take away from the experience, it's supposed to add to it. And maybe in some cases it's taking away from it, but for that travel times, as soon as they came out, the first thing they did was post a thread, and I think a questionnaire about the travel times, and do we like them, do we not like them, what do we think, trying to gauge the community and what they think, and see what's enjoyable and what's not. I think they'll still do what they think is best, but the fact that they asked means a lot as well, right? So I think we're going to answer the call right here and say thank you so much for watching, guys. For those of you guys watching on YouTube, you can join Answer the Call every Sunday at 9 a.m. Eastern Time, and come hang out. Watch it on twitch.tv/Torque17, or join the Discord, which will be linked below, where you can also suggest topics for next week. We have 2 possibilities for topics. It's either going to be discussing about the female model with hopefully a female guest, or the other one was... Sorry, I have to scroll up and find it. It was from Cayman. Is Star Citizen's Development 2 open? So I'm on the fence. They're going to flip-flop. It might be, the female model one might be a little bit further down the road. Or we have, is Star Citizen Development 2 open? Is it detrimental or not? So I think that one's really polarizing, and that one's going to be a really, really good discussion. So I'm really looking forward to both of those. And yeah, again, if you're watching on YouTube, if you like this video, please like it. If you have any sort of opinion, please leave a comment below on this topic, and make sure you hit that subscribe button for more videos like this in the future. If you're watching on Twitch and you haven't seen all of it, you can catch it on YouTube by typing !YouTube in chat at any time. And yeah, guys, I'll see you next week. Have a wonderful weekend, and catch you next time. Bye, everybody.